Minister. You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle. And it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Okay. Let's go. Caitlin, go ahead. Caitlin.
Thank you so much, President Trump.
Caitlin, go ahead.
On what you were saying there.
Say it. Go ahead, please.
Just to follow up on what you were saying about the Gazans leaving Gaza, going to other countries. One, where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision the world, people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable. And I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world will be there, and they'll live there. Palestinians also. Palestinians will live there. Many people will live there. But they've tried the other, and they've tried it for decades and decades and decades. It's not going to work. It didn't work. It will never work. And you have to learn from history. History has, just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad.
Where do those people go in the meantime, Mr. President?
But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done. And people can live in harmony and in peace. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank
you. You've been listening to President Trump along with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump obviously going through many things in that press conference, but I think it's most important to emphasize what he said about the Gaza Strip. Pretty stunning what he said, and let me just give you a few quotes here. He said the United States will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it. We'll own it. His quote. He said, I do see a long-term ownership position. He also said everybody I know loves the idea of the United States owning that land. Even Prime Minister Netanyahu referred to it as President Trump is taking it to another level. Our team coverage begins here right now. Jeff Zeleny live outside the White House. Jeff, look, Trump says a lot of things. He doesn't necessarily always follow through on what he says. In this case, though, this is a significant thing, right? It's not as if he misspoke or he said it once. He said it again and again and again. The United States will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it.
Aaron, it's extraordinary to hear a sitting American president say such words. Never mind the history here that really flies in the face of so much of what he said. But let's just focus on the president himself for one moment. He also said, did not back away from the idea of sending U.S. troops to the region. Donald Trump rose in his political prominence because of his opposition to America's longest wars in the Middle East, of course, Iraq and Afghanistan. And there we heard President Trump saying, not ruling out the idea of sending a U.S. Troops to the region. So that, of course, is one issue. But the whole idea of the U.S. owning that, and he was asked there, under what authority would that happen, answering everyone loves the idea.
Yep.
And, of course, our own Caitlin Collins asking the question there, what happens sort of when it's rebuilt, and envisioning this as a Riviera. So we also can't help but wonder here, as we've watched the president speak all day long at several events, really for a couple hours in length, making the sort of the story here about his ideas. Meanwhile, across Washington, across the country, and indeed the world, the government is being reshaped by Elon Musk, by others. So it's unclear if this is something that certainly is a provocative that gets headlines, which we should pay attention to it, of course, but also shining a light on this as opposed to what is actually happening in real time. The protests we can hear outside the White House here, of course, for the Israeli prime minister, but also people protesting what he's doing to this government, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to go to Israel in just a second. Obviously, the moment of this is so crucial. Caitlin Collins was inside that room. And Caitlin, in that room, obviously the cacophony of reporters all yelling out. Nonetheless, the news stunning, and the president did not directly answer the crucial question you asked about where the Palestinians who consider the Gaza Strip home would go.
Yeah, Aaron, it was a remarkable moment here in that press conference. Typically, just to give you a sense, when a world leader is here, they do a press conference that's known as a 2-and-2, where 2 reporters from one side asks a question and 2 reporters from the American press ask a question. This turned into a more freewheeling press conference, really building off of what Trump came out and said in his opening statement that built off of what he had been saying all day long, even before the Israeli prime minister arrived here at the White House, which was talking about Palestinians leaving Gaza while it is being rebuilt. He has now suggested twice that Egypt and Jordan could take them. Both of those countries have outright rejected any notion of that happening. And I should note the King of Jordan will be visiting here next week, as the president was just referencing to me there when he was answering my question, and looking at this in terms of what this looks like going forward, and how the United States would take ownership of the U.S. Gaza. He left open the idea that American forces could be involved in that. But the real crux of that question is where the Palestinians are supposed to go. There are over 1 million people living in that enclave. And while the president is talking about what it looks like now and how destroyed it has been since this war started 16 months ago, that is the question here, because obviously this is an area that is rife with tension and incredibly sensitive. And what that could look like is a massive question here of what could happen next. And so the president there unable to say where he thinks the Palestinians should go after this, where they would go while Gaza is being rebuilt. He said that they could potentially return to Gaza after that happened. That was the first time that he had suggested that all day long. And obviously is a key question. It is their homeland. It is where the Palestinians live right now. And so the question not just of who is in charge of the Gaza Strip after it would be rebuilt, but clearly you heard the president there essentially viewing this through a real estate lens, saying it could be the Riviera of the Middle East, as he was articulating what this could look like in terms of who lives there and who is in control of it. That has created a ton of questions. What does this mean for the future of the ceasefire tonight, Aaron? I think that hangs in the balance, because there was already a question when the prime minister was arriving here of how that second phase would be carried out and what exactly that would look like. Now, the question is whether or not Hamas still abides by this ceasefire, as they are hearing the American president say that the U.S. is going to take over the land in which Hamas lives now. And of course, many of these Palestinian civilians who have been fleeing this war and already displaced from their homes. And now the U.S. president is suggesting that they could permanently relocate from Gaza. A major question is to where. We'll see what the King of Jordan has to say about that when he's here at the White House next week. That obviously is a country that has already taken in a lot of refugees.
Yeah.
Major questions left unanswered here, and a very explosive press conference, Aaron.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Of course, Caitlin was in that room. Jim Sciutto and is with me from Washington, of course, has spent so much time on the ground in Israel. Jeremy Diamond is there in Tel Aviv tonight. Jeremy, can I just ask you, you hear the President of the United States say, we're going to take over that piece of land. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it. I see a long-term ownership position for the United States of America. Everybody I know loves the idea. Prime Minister Netanyahu, hardliner on the issue, says Trump's taking it to another level. What even would be the reaction within Israel to hear the President of the United States saying what he just said?
Well, first of all, I think, Aaron, we need to be really clear about what we just heard from the President of the United States. He is suggesting the forcible permanent displacement of about 2 million people from a place that they call home. He is talking about relocating Palestinians out of Gaza forcibly. He is talking about potentially using U.S. troops to do so, which would involve putting U.S. troops in combat to rout the Hamas militants who surely would not leave willingly, and also to remove Palestinian civilians who also will not leave their homes willingly. And so that obviously has enormous implications for what the president is suggesting here. And we should note that, as the president is talking about displacing Palestinians from Gaza, he is talking about it in the context of all that they have suffered over the last 15 months of war and decades of conflict. But rather than solving the conflict, the president is saying, let's take one party of the conflict out of this place that they call home and turn it into a real estate development that would attract, I think he said, the people of the world who would be able to live there. He did say that that would include some Palestinians, as well as also suggesting that that would also include Israelis. So this is a quite radical idea from President Trump, and certainly one that is going to be rejected out of hand by Palestinians on the ground, and I suspect by many Arab leaders in the region as well.
Well, I mean, Jim, just to state the obvious, and I know many like us who have reported from Israel on this issue, you will talk to someone who will talk about how they still have the keys to their family's home in Ashkelon, which is on obviously the Israeli side, who are Palestinians. Like, to imagine the people who live in Gaza are just going to happily, merrily go live in some kind of a permanent refugee camp like Syrians have been living in Syria is obviously absurd. But what President Trump just said there is the only reason to go back is if they have nowhere else to go. Jim, of course, that's not the reason they want to go back. They want to go back because it's home. So then what does all this actually mean? Does this all just become a whole lot of hot air or not?
Well, listen, apply that principle to any other war or conflict that involves two people fighting over a piece of land. Did George Mitchell suggest moving the Catholics out of Ireland, right? I mean, when you were speaking about South Africa, did you discuss moving all black South Africans out of Africa to solve the issue here? It's preposterous, and it's illegal by any understanding of international law that you would forcibly move people away from their homes. I mean, the agency here, right, is the agency of the Palestinian people. Right. Are they going to be frog-marched out of their country by U.S. forces as it's then rebuilt as a Riviera by presumably U.S. property developers? That seems to be what the president. It's not seems to be what the president is suggesting. It is what the president is suggesting in so many words. And I would just say that the thing is with Trump, he seems to be applying this principle, if you want to call it that, to other places as well. He wants Greenland, apply pressure to an ally, in this case, a treaty ally, Denmark, and take ownership, maybe send some money their way, and make it part of the U.S. Same with Panama. Violate a decades-old treaty to take back the Panama Canal. Where is the agency of the nations whose territory is sovereign, right? Much like the Palestinian people in Gaza. It seems to be a Trump worldview here that requires moving people off their land. The other piece I would say, it requires two other countries giving up their land, right? Jordan and Egypt to become new homes for the Palestinian people. And by the way, their leaders have said they have no interest in doing that.
And of course, there was also a question there about Samaria, part of the West Bank, that he put that on the table as well.
Yes,
I mean, Jeremy,
exactly.
In a normal world, we might be talking about some other things said here, except for what was said about Gaza was so strident and stark. And in so many senses shocking. He also said U.S. funding to UNRWA is cut off, right? U.S. is the largest donor to UNRWA, 30% last year. So, Jeremy, that just happened. All of this, and watching the look on Prime Minister Netanyahu's face, I was struck, Jeremy, by the fact that even he, I don't want to use the word giddy, but in a sense, that's the right word. And then he came out and said it himself. Trump's taking it to another level. He could never have dreamed of all these things being handed to him in any other setting than this one. And as he said, Trump is the greatest friend he's ever had.
Without a doubt. And you know, as President Trump was preparing to come into office, there was some anticipation among Israeli officials who knew, of course, that Trump had been friendly to Israel in the past, had been a great ally to Israel, had annexed recognized Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, for example, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, moves that President Trump referenced tonight. But there was still some uncertainty about where exactly he would stand on Gaza, where exactly he would stand on some of these thornier issues like annexation of the West Bank, whether or not he would play good cop, bad cop with Netanyahu. And today, Netanyahu is really just getting a raft of ideas that his right-wing allies in government have been promoting for years, being put on a silver platter here by President Trump. The forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, chief among them. And then also, as you mentioned, Aaron, there was something there where he said in the next 4 weeks that he would be making some kind of announcement regarding the annexation of the West Bank. Whether or not that is a decision for the United States to support annexation of the West Bank wasn't entirely clear, but clearly it was something that he discussed with the Israeli Prime Minister, and something that the Israeli Prime Minister here in Israel has talked about, has campaigned on, and has been pushed on by his right-wing governing partners.
And to that point, Jeremy, I suppose if the U.S. president believes the U.S. can take ownership of Gaza by some fiat or whatever, I suppose he imagines he can declare that Israel can take ownership of the West Bank, I imagine, based on that principle.